What's up, guys? It's Toad back again as usual. Another good day yesterday, 3-1. I think it was a 3-1 Saturday, followed up by a 3-1 Sunday. The NFL plays went 2-0, both underdogs, money line cashed. Love to see that. It was no sweat on either of them, man. As ugly as those both looked on the surface, I was like, man, you're going to kill me for this. Denver Broncos and Carolina Panthers, everybody. When I talk about that, like in public, people are like, are you insane? Like, they're looking at me like I have two heads. I'm like, the Carolina Panthers will win outright. Don't worry about it. Well, all right. I mean, I'm not going to say I wasn't worried, but once the game started, I was like, oh, this looks good. All right. Both of those got there. Andy Dalton, baby. He became the only quarterback so far this season to have a 300-yard passing performance and 3 touchdowns in a game. Andy Dalton, man, he's the best quarterback in the league. And then Bo Nix put together a nice performance, too. I told you, man, he was going to use his legs a little bit. Looked pretty good. Tampa's secondary is kind of in shambles right now. I didn't expect Tampa's offense to be that bad, but Denver's defense playing pretty well, too. So I liked all that. The Paul Skeens game, under 1 with no sweat at all. Cincinnati-Pittsburgh, Skeens versus Green. That was an easy one as well. And then the only loss, unfortunately, was the one that I paid the most for, the Houston run line one. And if I made that a first 5-inning bet, it would have won. I mean, I told you the starting pitching matchup was a huge advantage to Houston, which it was, but I thought the whole game was. They were up 4-0 into the 6th inning. So you're Houston, man, there's not really an excuse for blowing that lead, although Houston, they're not in danger of being knocked out of the playoffs or anything like that. All right, let's talk about tonight's card, or today/tonight. I think it's all night games, right? We only have 6 games on the board across the 2 professional men's sports here, and 2 of them are the NFL. Monday night doubleheader. Both games are going to be on at the same time. Gee, I wonder which one of these games is going to draw more attention. The game between the 2 0-2 teams or Jaguars-Bills. I don't know. Although Cincinnati, I mean, they'll probably draw a little bit of viewership, I guess. Maybe Jaden Daniels will. Johnny, I know, you're a broken record, man. You guys either want me to show titties or you want me to bring a woman with titties on. I should have a co-host on that we can have this weird like interaction between us, a weird chemistry between the both of us, where she has no idea what's going on and I'm trying to autistically explain sports betting to her. That's what we should do. All right. Cubs Philadelphia. I mean, this is the first game that I looked at. I'll break down every one of these games real quick, I guess. Why not? I'm not playing on any of these. I don't love them, but what's up, Johnny? No, man, all of YouTube is here. What are you talking about? Philadelphia, I mean, they played in last night's game. It was a big series. They were at the New York Mets. On Monday, you tend to want to look to go against the teams that played in the Sunday night game. That's like the initial way to start looking at this, but looking at the pitching matchup and the motivational disparity here, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. Philadelphia, they are returning home from a road trip. It was only a 2-series road trip. It did take them to Milwaukee, but then they had a 4-game series against the Mets, so they were not that far from home at that point. They lost the series to the Mets. I mean, I think Philadelphia got a little bit comfortable with this lead, and now maybe after this losing series, maybe they're starting to feel a little bit less comfortable, although I think they still pretty much have the division wrapped up. They did clinch a playoff spot already somewhere in the mix here, but they have not clinched the division yet because they couldn't beat the Mets. So Philadelphia still has a little bit of motivation here. Chicago Cubs, they're eliminated, but they may be a little bit motivated to play the role of spoiler. Problem I would have with playing the Cubs here at all would be that this is Aaron Nola, who's one of the better pitchers for Philadelphia, up against Nate Pearson, who I don't even know who he is, but I believe he's going to be giving the Cubs an opener. I think the Cubs are going with a bullpen game in this one, so it doesn't even really matter who Pearson is. I think he'll probably be out of there a couple innings into the game. I don't like the bullpen approach, even though I know there are some advantages to it where you're just rolling out all these different pitchers, especially during September. We have more guys in the bullpen with the expanded bullpens, and the hitters have to like readjust every time a new pitcher comes in. I understand the idea behind it, but I don't like it. I mean, there does seem to be some traction on the under in this game, probably for that reason. The Phillies are sitting at -168, down from -170. I see no real read on the side there, but the total does look like the market read is on the under. It's sitting at 8, 71% of tickets on the over, 71% of the cash on the under. You fill a titty, baby, yeah. So that one, yeah, I mean, the under would be the way I would look there, if anything, but obviously I'm not playing this game. Boston, Toronto, my Boston Red Sox swept the doubleheader against the Twins yesterday after the rain out and are still alive. Like, the Red Sox, they just do this all the time, man. They want you to hold on to that last shred of hope until the last second. They're not going to do anything, man. They're still 4 games out of the wild card, I think, with like 7 games left. This is not going to happen, okay? But the Red Sox, they are coming off of that, and now they're starting a road trip. It's not really the worst spot for the Red Sox. I mean, they are the team that's going to have the motivation here because they're up against the wall right now, up against death's door, basically. And Toronto has nothing to play for, but Toronto might want to play the role of spoiler because this is an AL East divisional rivalry here. You do have Tanner Houck pitching for the Red Sox. His stats against Toronto are actually pretty good. He's had a good season overall. I was looking at Minnesota stats there. Houck, in 51 at-bats, has held Toronto to a 176 average and 482 OPS, 13-2 strikeout walk ratio. So he does have really good stats against Toronto in his career. Most of it is this year, I think. Well, I think all of it is. Is he a rookie? No, I don't know. He's been around for a while. Yeah, he's been around for a while. I just don't even remember him being around. It feels like he's still a rookie almost. This is his first MVP, or first, yeah, MVP. First, I can't even talk anymore. First All-Star appearance was this year. But the problem is, as I mentioned before, since his All-Star appearance, which he did terribly in, by the way, he basically has fallen off a cliff, and he has not been anywhere near as good since then. So I don't know if I completely trust Houck the way he's been pitching. Chris Bassett has actually been pitching better recently out of the two of them, even though his whip is terrible. Even his last start where he gave up 7 earned runs, it's not as bad as it looks or 7 runs, excuse me, only one of them was earned. So even though, yeah, he did put 9 men on base, but the defense was basically so bad that he couldn't get out of the innings that he was pitching in. So I don't think it was all his fault, really. But he's been the better of the two pitchers in the recent starts, I would say, between him and Houck, as weird as it sounds. And his numbers against Boston are actually good as well. He's held them in 76 at-bats to a 197 batting average and 504 OPS, 20-3 strikeout walk ratio. So that has me looking potentially to play an under here. The problem is that Bassett, I don't know if I trust him in home games, man. He has these kind of crazy home road splits with a 4.58 home ERA this year and 3.58 on the road. So he is a lot better on the road than he is at home. So I don't know if I trust him either. This is a line where Toronto's dropped from -125 to -115, even though it looks like they have 86% of the cash and 54% of the tickets on Boston. I wouldn't be surprised that Boston is public because the public knows, I mean, they have the better record as bad as they are, and they're the team that needs to win the game. So that would attract the public action. I don't know about this line moving down because the fact that the line's dropped a little bit would indicate there is some money actually on the Red Sox side as well. I don't know. My first look to this was the under as well in this one, just because Houck and Bassett each have good stats against these opposing lineups, like really good. Totals ticked up from 7.5 to 8, 71% of the tickets on the over, 61% of the cash on the over, so less of the cash than the tickets. I would say that's a little bit of a market read, slightly towards the under. I don't like it as much as I like the other under, to be honest, because I don't trust either of these starters. Like I said, Houck has been terrible since the All-Star break, and Bassett is nowhere near as good as at home. So that's the way that I kind of read that game. Then you have Houston, Seattle. Houston's returning home from a road trip. Toronto, I believe, is not. I think Toronto is too. Toronto went to Texas and then to Tampa, so Toronto's in a return home spot as well. And they had a very unsuccessful road trip. But, I mean, their season is over, so I don't know how much you can really take away from that aspect of it. But Houston is actually the team that's not returning home from a road trip. Excuse me. So the other 3 home teams all are returning home from road trips, but none of them were really an extended road trip. Houston almost swept Anaheim yesterday and, of course, lost and cost me the game there. This is Seattle at Houston. Seattle needs this game more, man, because Seattle is in the wild card hunt right now still. They are in it more so than the Red Sox are at this point. They're ahead of where the Red Sox are. They're only 5 games out of the division, although the division is basically sealed up for Houston. I mean, there aren't really that many games left. Houston, because they're in a return, or no, they're not in a return home swap. Why do I keep saying that? They're just staying at home. But because they have a decent padding in the division at this point, you could see Seattle be the more motivated team here. I mean, Seattle needs the game more, but then again, when you need the game more, the pressure is on. So that may be the case with Seattle. It may be less the case with Boston just because they probably realize that they're not going to make the playoffs at this point. So maybe that's actually getting Boston to play a little bit looser, whereas Seattle might be playing a little bit tighter. This is a game where the first look to this one was also to an under with 2 good pitchers going, man. Bryce Miller has a really good, is having a really good season, man. 3.06 ERA, 0.99 whip. What's up, Dr. Penguin? You're horny? Yeah, aren't we all? That's just called being a dude. Up against Houston, Bryce Miller's stats are also really good. He's in 82 at-bats. He's held them to a 220 average and 687 OPS, although 12.6 strikeout walk ratio isn't that good, but he's done pretty well against Houston. The problem that I have with Bryce Miller here is that his splits are even more egregious than Bassett's are, but they're the reverse. I mean, look at these crazy splits from Bryce Miller this year. 1.96 ERA at home, which Safeco Field, man, it's a safe environment for pitching in Safeco there, or T-Mobile, whatever it's called now. So not surprising he's better at home, but this is drastic. A 1.96 home ERA and 4.44 on the road. So I don't trust Miller as much on the road, even though his numbers against Houston are decent. Hunter Brown, I mean, his stats still don't look that great on the season. His whip is still a bit high. His ERA has gotten down a lot. He was awful at the beginning of the season, but he's been really, really good for the last few months now. So he's become a really good pitcher, and I think he has good numbers up against Seattle too. So again, that's why I was kind of looking towards an under here. He's held them to a 244 average, 645 OPS, and 78 at bats. Still has walked too many of them, but he also has a lot of strikeouts, and he's a little bit wild at times, and he does strike out a lot of guys as well. Houston is up from minus 143 to minus 154, so the market read does look like it's on the Houston side, on the side. 74% of the cash, 62% of the tickets. Again, I'm not quite sure about that, although Bryce Miller definitely struggles on the road, but like I said, Seattle does need this game more, but that does mean the pressure is on Seattle too. It does look like the market may be indicating on the under. It's just sitting at 7.5 juice to the over here, but 57% of tickets on the over. This says 100% of the cash on the under. That can't be right, but it probably is indicating there is some percentage of the cash actually on the under in this one. So probably, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't trust it. My favorite out of those 3 so far is the under in the Cubs-Philly game, to be honest, even though I don't trust a bullpen game either. Although my favorite lean would probably be a side in this last game here, San Francisco, Arizona. Even though Arizona is returning home from a road trip, I actually lean to the Arizona side here. Even though they're returning home and they lost their win streak there, they had a pretty successful road trip, really, for the most part, because they beat up on Milwaukee and they almost swept Milwaukee. And I mentioned I actually liked Arizona to lose the final game of that series yesterday, but it was not how I expected it to be. Jordan Montgomery wasn't very good. I expected him to be the main factor in why Arizona was going to lose that game, but Montas did terrible for Milwaukee too. Milwaukee was actually way behind in the game, and they made a huge comeback to win the game. So Milwaukee, I guess, was really motivated to avoid the sweep because Milwaukee is going to be in the playoffs. They already won their division. Arizona, even though they are returning home for a road trip, only a 2-series road trip, and I don't think it's going to have that much impact, especially when they're just playing through and they did not have a day off here. I think that actually mitigates the return home spot a little bit, so it's not going to be as distracting. But Arizona, they're still fighting, man. They're fighting for a wild card here. They're not going to win their division at this point. They're still in the wild card hunt. I think they may be in the last wild card spot right now. I forget what the situation is, but it is a battle, dude. So they do need to play. They do need to win, which does mean the pressure is on as well, but they're the team that has the motivation here at the very least. San Francisco, they're coming off a sweep on the road. They're coming off they're in the middle of a very successful road trip where they beat Baltimore and then they swept Kansas City. So they are hot right now. So I don't know if I want to really step in front of that train, but Hayden Birdsong is pitching for San Francisco here. He's a young rookie, and he has not been that good this year. His ERA, 4.74, 1.39 whip. Those are bad stats. 71 to 38 strikeout walk ratio, not that impressive either. The 38 walks is really what's unimpressive. He's been erratic, dude. He's wild. His strikeout total is actually high in 62 and 2/3 innings pitched and only 49 hits allowed. So the rest of his stats besides the walks are actually good, but the walks are so high that his whip is just terrible. And even though his ERA is actually good this month, it hasn't been that impressive, really, with an 11 to 8 strikeout walk ratio. I don't trust Birdsong, even though he's not allowing that many runs. And he just saw Arizona on September 4th. So I think that was the first time Arizona had seen him. So now Arizona has seen him already, and he didn't do that well in that game. He walked 5 guys in 3 innings and allowed 3 hits as well, even though he limited the damage somewhat, allowing only 2 runs. That was not an inspiring performance, and now Arizona just saw him. So Arizona's offense should be familiar with him now, know what he throws. And even after that game, 4.4 strikeout walk ratio, 273 average allowed to them, which isn't that high, but a 1,012 OPS is not great. Allowing a home run there to Eugenio Suarez. I don't know, man. I don't trust Birdsong. Eduardo Rodriguez, I don't trust him either, though, with a 5.09 ERA, 1.45 whip. But he has not been seen by San Francisco this season. I mean, he hasn't been pitching for that much this season. He just came back. Former Red Sox World Series champion, Eduardo Rodriguez. He was on the Red Sox back in 2018, I believe, when they won it. And up against San Francisco, he does actually have good numbers off of them, and 42 at-bats, although it's all clustered around 4 of their hitters, so the other hitters haven't even seen him. 14 to 2 strikeout walk ratio, 214 average against, and 655 OPS. So Rodriguez has the better of this matchup, and Arizona does have more motivation here. But I was also thinking, because Rodriguez, I don't know if I trust him because his stats are bad enough, that I was also potentially thinking about an over in this game, but it doesn't look like the market's, I don't know, the market is kind of conflicted on the over here, where it looks like the lines move from 9 juice to the under to 9 juice to the over. 62% of the tickets on the over, but only 56% of the cash on the over. So it looks like the line has moved towards the over, but the cash discrepancy is less on the over. I don't know, but I do see it indicating on Arizona a little bit on the side, but you have to pay a price. Up from minus 160 to minus 166, 55% of the tickets and 66% of the cash. So do you trust Eduardo Rodriguez is really the question. I mean, he does have good numbers against a San Francisco lineup that isn't really that potent, and half of their lineup has never seen him before. So that would be the way that I do lean, but you're paying a lot, man, for Arizona here. I think the fact that Arizona needs to win is built into this line here. So I don't know. I don't trust paying that much of a price here. Yeah, that's right. We're all weirdos here, Penguin. All right, and now, of course, the NFL. I do have one play in the NFL, as I mentioned on my NFL show. You can go see how I broke this game down there. Jacksonville Jaguars plus 5.5 is the one play I have in these 2 games. I think it's a sandwich spot for the Bills. The Bills are up from 4 to 5.5, but I think the 4 was actually the look ahead. The look ahead on this, I think, was 3.5 or 4. And then after the Bills crushed Miami on Thursday night and the Jaguars looked ugly and lost to the Cleveland Browns, which my read was right on both of those games, basically, at least on the final scores, and I won on the Cleveland Browns in that game. After those games, now the Bills are a 5.5-point favorite. They're definitely public with 72% of the tickets. I see 77% of the cash on them now, which concerns me a little bit, but I still think that playing the Jaguars is the right side here and a fade of the public. But although law of averages says I'm going to lose one of these games after I won my other 2 plays yesterday. But this is not a good spot for Buffalo, dude. Buffalo, they crushed Miami on Thursday. And as I said, now they have extended time off after playing on Thursday. And I think when you're coming off a big win like that and you're 2-0, you go into that extra time off. It's almost like having a bye, and I don't think it serves you well. I think it disrupts your winning momentum. You just want to keep playing. You don't want to sit there and think about it and think about how good you are and listen to the media talking about Buffalo's 2-0, awesome start. These guys are really awesome. It tends to like inflate your confidence too much, I think, inflate your egos too much. Now they get this Jacksonville game, even though, yes, it is a Monday night game, and yes, Jacksonville did beat Buffalo in even more bad spot, I think, for Buffalo last year. Jacksonville won in London, where Jacksonville had already played the prior week in London, so they were just staying in London. It was a huge advantage for Jacksonville in that game last year, which I won money on that one. I don't think Buffalo's going to have, like, revenge on their mind from that, though. I mean, that was a weird London game. You don't really think about that. Really, in the NFL, the only revenge that really seems to matter that much is who eliminated you from the playoffs. And Jacksonville didn't even make the playoffs while Buffalo did. So Jacksonville might still be actually the team with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder there. Buffalo coming off that huge divisional game where they beat Miami, which, as I also pointed out, was misleading because Buffalo had a +3 turnover margin in that game. They capitalized on the turnovers, and Miami actually outgained them by like 100 yards in the game. So the final score was not really an indicator of how that game actually went. Even though I liked Buffalo in that game, Buffalo did not actually play that well in that game. And then who do they have up next? They have the Baltimore Ravens, followed by the Houston Texans, and then actually the New York Jets, which actually is turning into what looks like it's going to be a big matchup if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, because the Jets are competitive now too. So they have a huge game against a playoff team from last year, one of the better teams in the AFC, off of a big win over Dallas, really. Baltimore up next, then Houston, who was a playoff team last year, and then the Jets. Big divisional game there. So this is like the down spot in Buffalo's schedule, man. So this, if they're going to overlook any of these games, it would be this one. And they're not really going to be like needing to win a game as they're off to a 2-0 start. So I think this is a spot where they could overlook Jacksonville, whereas Jacksonville, they're supposed to be competitive this year, and I think they're more competitive than they look. But they're off to an 0-2 start, man. And when you're 0-2, since the expanded season to 17 games, I think only 2 teams that started 0-2 made the playoffs, which is weird to me. Like, you'd think that with the extra game, you think that as long, like, you know, with the season being longer, you think that gives you more opportunity to come back from being down, from starting 0-2, right? Like, because you have more games to play. So I don't know why that's the case, but only 2 teams, I think, who have started 0-2 have made the playoffs in the 17-game season. And teams that are 0-3, as I mentioned on one of my other shows, it's actually worse than I even let on, I think, because I thought it was a stat about starting 0-4, but 0-3, I think only like a few teams have made the playoffs starting 0-3, going all the way back like 20 years or all the way back to 2000 or something like that. Only a few teams. It's like the odds are massively stacked in your favor if you don't. Like, if you start 0-3, you don't make the playoffs, basically. So Jacksonville, they're going to be extra motivated because of that, and they're an underdog. So that's what you want. Like, when you have a team that, yeah, the pressure might be on, they might need to win the game, but if they're a big underdog and you know you're going to get that effort, that they're going to be motivated like that, that's a spot where you want to come in. The pressure tends to crack the team more if they're, like, favored and they have to, like, and they're expected to win and they have to cover like a favorite price like that. That's when you can see that pressure really get to them, and it's really dangerous to take that team when they're getting a bunch of points like this. And I think they're getting value just because of last week's results. The line moved like 2 more points. Yeah, I think it's a spot to take Jacksonville. And Jacksonville, even though their offense has not been putting up point totals here, their defense has actually not been bad. They probably should have won the game against Miami. They were winning that game. They played pretty well. They held that Miami offense way down. And then they played another pretty good defensive game against Cleveland. So Jacksonville's defense has been playing decently. And if this turns into a defensive game, man, you want to be on the team that's getting the points as well. So that could be the case here, as Buffalo is thought to be this like higher scoring team. They do have these high point totals so far this year, but like I said, I think the one against Miami was misleading, and Miami's defense is not really that good, and Buffalo still had to like use a bunch of those turnovers to put up that point total that they did there. So I think, again, it's a little bit of a misleadingly high point total for Buffalo. Buffalo, since they brought in this new OC, he's been more of like a ground game focused offensive coordinator. Buffalo is like a run first team now. Like, they lost Stephon Diggs, they lost Gabe Davis as well. So their top 2 wide receivers they had last year are gone from this team, even though, yes, they have Josh Allen. I don't think their passing offense is just going to be totally anemic. Excuse me. But I can't talk at all this morning, man. Sorry, I'm running on no sleep. But Buffalo, yeah, I mean, they are a run-heavy offensive attack now with James Cook in there. He's been doing well so far, but a team that's going to run the game, that's going to run the ball a lot on the ground like that, that shortens the game as well. So that doesn't lend itself to covering large numbers as a favorite either. So there is that factor as well. So I'm on Jacksonville. I like the Jacksonville side for all those reasons. And then in the other game's harder to read, man. And as far as the total in that game, I mean, it does look like the total's going down. It's gone down from 47 juice to the over to 45.5 juice to the over. Public is going to come in on overs, but they're actually more on the over in this one than they are in the other game, which seems weird to me because I think the other game, I mean, the odds makers are telling you the other game is the one that should be higher scoring, which I agree with. Now, this game looks like it's actually a battle of two teams that play pretty good defense, so I don't expect this game to be as high scoring. 73% of tickets coming in on the over and 86% of the cash on the over. Doesn't seem right because the line has moved down 1.5 points. So I don't really actually think that the money is on the over in that one. On the Commanders, or Redskins, excuse me. I got to stop saying Commanders just because I'm reading it off the scoreboard. I hate that name. The Redskins-Bengals game, that total's down from 47.5 to 46.5, but only 52% of the tickets and 55% of the cash on the over. So I do actually think there may be some legitimate money actually coming in on the over in this one. And maybe the line moved down just because maybe some professionals came in and hit the number, because I think 47 is actually a key number for NFL totals. I don't play NFL totals that much, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think they might have wanted to knock the total down below 47 to try to come in and take the over at the better number. That may be what's going on with the total market there. It may have been a setup. I'm not sure. And as far as the side, Bengals are actually up from 7 to 7.5. Very public with 88% of the tickets on them, but 90% of the cash. So the side, I mean, when I broke down this game on my other show, I mentioned that I leaned to Washington just because it would be a situation where you'd be fading the public basically just by doing that. And all other things, you know, if you throw out everything else, like fading the public blindly is not really the worst idea. Is the public, you know, in the NFL especially, the line has to adjust to where the public is going to be because that's where the influx of the public money is going to be. But here it actually looks like the line's moved up a little bit, and you're actually getting the hook, the 7.5 on Washington here. So I don't trust the Washington side actually as much as I probably trust the over more than the side in this game. I mentioned that Cincinnati is coming off a brutal loss, which is true. So they're not in the greatest spot here, I wouldn't say. That was a tough loss to take at Kansas City, or they lost, I think, right near the end on a Kansas City field goal. Cincinnati kind of got screwed by some reffing calls in that game as well. As you see, Kansas City gets the reffing calls, man. It's bullshit. It happened again last night. I had a pick on Atlanta in my pools last night, plus 3.5, which I think was the right side in such a low-scoring game. And there was blatant pass interference in the end zone on Kansas City defending Kyle Pitts there. They literally just basically ran into him and rammed him and grabbed him before the pass was even there. Just blatant PI, and it wasn't even called because it's the Kansas City Chiefs. And yeah, you could say there were a couple of makeup calls there at the end for Cincinnati there on their final drive, although those were actually probably correct PI calls. I was just surprised that they made the calls, or maybe there was just one on Kansas City on that last drive. And yeah, Cincinnati still was unable to do it. Cincinnati couldn't even convert, or not Cincinnati, what am I saying? Atlanta couldn't even convert the 4th and inches there at the end. A pathetically bad outside run call on that play. I don't know what that was. Just ram it up the middle, dude. What are you doing? Use your power running back, or even just have Kirk Cousins fall over the line. I mean, I don't know what you're doing. But Cincinnati, yeah. I mean, that was still a brutal loss against Kansas City there, but they don't have anything coming up next with Carolina. Even though the Carolina's no longer winless, baby. Cincinnati, I mean, they may be a little bit focused on this game because it's Washington and because they're 0-2. This is the 0-2 phenomenon, man. Both of these teams are 0-2 here. But Cincinnati is the one who is expected to contend. I actually forgot that they were 0-2. For some reason, I forgot that they lost to New England in Week 1 when I was handicapping this game on my NFL show. So I think the lean on the Washington side is less strong than I don't actually really like it. Like I mentioned, I slightly lean that way, and maybe I still do, but it's not strong at all because you're looking at a Cincinnati team where Cincinnati, they're 0-2, dude. So they don't want to start 0-3. Again, if you start 0-3, you're probably not going to make the playoffs. They know they have to win this game at this point because they're sitting 0-2. They're supposed to be a contender. It's Monday night. They're not going to want to lose this game. So this is actually a play where maybe it'll be a little bit difficult for them to cover, although I think because I like the over in this one too, because I think Washington is a very over-friendly team this year, because I think Jaden Daniels improves their offense significantly from what it was last year. And I think that the odds makers haven't caught up to that yet because Washington put up an ugly point total last week against the Giants. But Washington scored 7 times. It's just that they were all field goals, so they were not able to convert in the red zone. Jaden Daniels is looking pretty good, though. Like, on his feet, he's picking up a lot of rushing yards. He's a dual-threat quarterback that could be difficult to defend. And Washington's defense is still looking like they're probably pretty terrible. So that would have me leaning to the over in this one as well. But in general, I just think Washington's going to wind up being an over type of team generally until we see that anything changes as far as that's concerned. But, yeah, Cincinnati, I mean, this is the type of play where because it's an over, I was going to say that may make it a little bit easier to cover a larger number as a favorite for Cincinnati, although I'm still not going to be laying the points with a team that's this public here. And again, like I said, if the pressure is on you, and even though both of these teams are 0-2, nobody expected anything out of Washington this year, so I think the pressure is way more on Cincinnati here. We can't start 0-3. And it could be a situation where the public is coming in and saying there's no way the Cincinnati team with Joe Burrow back, there's no way they're going to start 0-3, right? So I would not want to play on the Cincinnati side still for those reasons. Like asking them to cover a large number like this when the pressure might be really on them. I don't love that. And by the way, Joe Burrow, with the stupid bleached hair that he has now, which looks awful. He looks like Roy Batty from Blade Runner. I don't know what this look is, dude. But Cincinnati, I don't know what they did in preseason, but Cincinnati in regular season play is winless with Joe Burrow's bleach blonde hair like this. The bleach blonde Burrow, he's got to get rid of that, dude. Just shave your head bald and let it grow back its natural hair color, man. Because Cincinnati, they may not win another game with Joe Burrow looking like this. I don't know. I think it's impacting his mental state a little bit. I'm joking, but maybe I'm not. Like, I don't know. If you look this way, how can you be totally confident, dude? Your hair looks terrible. Do something about it. But anyway, yeah, Cincinnati, yeah, like the pressure may be on them a little bit, but this is probably a scenario where I would say the teaser actually makes sense. Although, of course, you would have had to have tied it to one of the other games this week, or you could tease this game and tease it into a game that's happening next week. So the NFL teasers, I am of the opinion that the NFL is the only sport where teasers are actually worth playing, but you have to get a minus 120 price on it or better. Minus 120 is like really the best that you're ever going to do because the books know that teasers are advantageous if you know what you're doing in the NFL, and it's only 2 team 6-point teasers are basically the only teasers that have any advantage at all, and you have to get a price of minus 120 or better on them. Otherwise, it's not worth playing. But the 2 team 6-point teaser means you get to move the line 6 points, but both plays have to win. But this is one where this is like the typical Stanford Wong teaser, which is the only teaser where you have an edge in the NFL. I mentioned this in my Betting 101 video, but I'll bring it up again here just because I think it makes sense to put Cincinnati in a teaser here if you were a teaser player, because the only 2 ways that you want to tease ever in the NFL are you want to go through the key numbers of 3, 4, and 7 because those individual numbers are worth more than any other numbers in any sport, really. So those points have such an added value to them that it actually makes the teaser worth it because they're so key in the NFL. So that means the only ways that you want to do it are if you have a team that's a 1.5, 2, or 2.5 point underdog, you can tease them up above the 7 to 7.5, 8, or 8.5, or you find a 7.5, 8, or 8.5 point favorite and knock that line down below 3, down to 1.5, 2, or 2.5. Those are the only ways that you want to play the teaser. So in this case, you could tease Cincinnati from 7.5 down to 1.5, and then you would have to tie that in with another leg of a teaser. So find another favorite that is favored by 7.5 or whatever in that range, 7.5, 8, 8.5, or an underdog that's in the range of 1.5 to 2.5 and tease that. And so for that underdog, you want it to be a play where probably it's going to be a lower scoring game. If you want to tease an underdog up, where you think that underdog is going to be competitive and it's highly unlikely that they're going to lose by a large margin, like that usually like a defensive battle type of game up against a bad offense or something like that. But in this case, I think it makes sense to tease Cincinnati down because you're talking about an 0-2 contending team here, man. So the odds that they're actually going to lose this game outright are probably not that high. But asking them to cover the spread is a totally different ask. Like with the pressure being on them, that's a lot more difficult for them to do. But teasing them down to just win the game, that does make way more sense. So that's what I'd say about those games. That's my breakdown for today, man. Thanks for hanging out. As usual, I got to get out of here. I'm Tower Gang Toad, of course. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang Podcast, the most offensive, funny podcast that has ever been made. We're on all the things. You can find us. Sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/TowerGang, and you can get extra content, bonus, live pre-show, live post-show, just extra content all over the place, and get to hang out with us in a Telegram. Once again, my only play, I just took it off again because I had left it on. Jacksonville Jaguars +5.5 is my only play on the Monday night card. Let's get it done. Let's win, and I'll be back again, as always. Have a good one, man. Peace out.